welcome back to another Strategoi video. Ryan here, doing a solo tournament report video on a tournament that I recently participated in just outside of Rotterdam in the Netherlands in a port town called Rotterdam. It was just me at this tournament of the three of us, so I'll just be covering it alone. Though it should be noted that this is not the tournament report Nick and I had planned to be posting sometime before this, as it is out of chronological order now. But Nick was in Italy and we had a hard time getting internet connection and timing down for us to record it. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this one a little out of sequence, and then we'll come back to that one when we can. So as per usual, we'll talk about, or I will talk about the tournament in general, some army lists, or my army list in particular, my matchups, and conclude with some overall thoughts. So this tournament had a pretty typical rules pack. We had roughly 50 players. I say roughly because at this moment, a week and a couple days out, we still, to my knowledge, don't have the official full breakdown of who placed where in the rankings. So I'm not 100% sure of what the final build of our list of armies was, though I do know what the original 50 lists were before some people had to drop out and maybe got filled, those slots. But in any case, it was 3 games, 3 hours each. I'm not 100% sure if it was a literal hard, fast rule of 3 rounds minimum, but chess clocks, were they to be used, were required if a player requested them. I myself did use a chess clock for 2 out of 3 of my games, but that was more just to kind of give me a friendly chance to practice working on my extremely long hero phases in my Tzeentch army. The 3 missions were Prize of Gallet, the Mighty and the Cunning, and Realmstone Cache, which I'll discuss as they come up in the individual matchups. And lastly, the scoring was a first win, tie, or loss award, plus whatever the differential system victory points difference was. So in the end, it made a bigger impact if you won, and then a more subtle impact based off of what your VP differential was with your opponent. As for the meta, it was a mix of seasoned and new players once again, or maybe not per se new, but at least some fresh faces. Hard to say because of the tournaments I've been to. This was my 16th, I believe. I only had played games with about 14 players of the 50 and recognized perhaps an additional I don't know, let's say additional 11 or so, meaning that I knew no more than about half the people there, which is great for such a small tournament scene that we have. Even though we have a very vibrant tournament scene here in the Netherlands, I usually end up knowing most of the faces, especially as I kind of collect games with different people over time and make new friends. As far as the meta is concerned, with the armies themselves, Stormcast was at least originally with the original 50 list before dropouts happened. We had 6 Stormcast lists of all different types, 5 Ogre Mod Tribes lists that I'm pretty sure were all Beastclaw Raiders, a lot of monster trucking going around, at least one with Kragnos in it, I believe. Nurgle, we had an all flies list, and we had a large amount of Beasts of Nurgle list, and I'm not 100% sure what the other 2 were. I didn't come up against Nurgle, so I got to avoid that fortunately this time, although I've definitely played my fair share. 4 Skaven armies, all 4 of which, if I'm not mistaken, had large Clan Eshin elements, if not entirely the kind of net build right now of a lot of Clan Eshin shooting and deep striking, which is pretty strong. And then only 3 Night Haunt lists, which might have been a little bit of a surprise, but still, Night Haunt very strong. And I did play one of the Night Haunt lists. So of these different armies, I ended up playing a Skaven list and a Night Haunt list. The other one was originally supposed to be Tzeentch, but got flipped last minute to Ironjaws. Not present at all were Flesh Eater Courts, largely because Nick wasn't there. He's kind of our Netherlands meta consistent Flesh Eater player for at least the moment. And then of the 3 Orc War Clans armies, I'm not counting Big Wa as one that you would necessarily say was or was not there. Cruel Boys was the only one that wasn't, which means by implication Bone Splitters was, which we don't see too often, but some interesting results there, which I'll report on at the end. As for the experience, of all the tournaments I've been to, especially ones that didn't have buffets, this is unquestionably the best food selection we had, with burgers, a salad, soup, cake. It was very good, and fries too, and all of them at a high quality. The venue was a hotel, basically a little cozy hotel in this sleepier little town, Rotterdam, and was just had great service all around. Definitely would go back to that venue, although to be fair, it's a little hard to get to if you don't have a car, which a lot of us in some of the bigger cities in the Netherlands just don't. But anyway, it was still lovely. As far as the cool army giveaway that I've written down here, at the very end, after all awards have been given out, we played like a little mini game where every player rolled a die in kind of sequence, well, at the same time, but we had rounds, and if you didn't get a 6, you were removed immediately with single elimination, but everyone that kept rolling 6s kept competing against each other, and the last person standing won a 1,000 point, I believe, very well painted Sylvaneth army with some Lady of Vines was in there for sure, some Kurnoths, I believe. It looked fantastic, and I know the player himself from Haarlem, if I'm not mistaken, was super happy to have won it. So that was definitely a cool extra feature of the tournament. For my personal experience, I ended up going 1-2 after what might have been different with this last minute dropout, where the tournament organizer himself, Neil, who's a lovely guy, ended up having to step in with his 3 Maw Crushers list, which I'll talk about more later, and I definitely think was a less favorable matchup for me than what's it called, the Tzeentch list I was originally supposed to play. But all told, I only played against friendly opponents, 2 of which I knew before, and 1 of which I'd even played against before in our homes, never at a tournament, and on a team with. This is the Night Haunt player, Mitchell. And then my last opponent, the Skaven player, Yari, ended up becoming a new friend, I think. So it was a lovely game, and all 3 of them were lovely, actually. All 3 of them were also really pretty close games in one way or the other. Could have gone either way, and I would much prefer this and lose more often than win if it means that the games are interesting and not particularly 20-0 type games like we sometimes see. Alright, so here's my army list. It's super complicated, and the version I'm playing now and practicing for a teams tournament coming up soon is even more complicated, but I'll walk you through it. This will take up a good chunk of the time because I'm not going to do too much of a blow-by-blow with the matchups themselves. But, Tzeentch, if you're not familiar, is a magic-heavy army and is already super complicated. And I kind of intentionally, as the Johnny-type player that I am, who likes list building and creative thinking with, different combos and these kinds of strategies, leaned very heavily into Tzeentch. Now, why this magic element, and particularly the sub-faction Guild of Summoners. Now, though I mainly consider myself an Order player and a Cities player amongst the Order armies, Tzeentch is kind of my secret second army. But because I've been more or less guiding my tournament participation by needing to get things painted and guiding that by books that are coming out or rules that are about to fall off, I've been mostly using the pressure of new books coming out to force me to play armies as they need to come out. And because Cities has so many coalition options, I was justified in kind of working with almost any of those coalition armies as they got a little pressure put on them to use them before the new book. Especially with Cities coming out with Dawnbringer Crusades and whatever might happen with units getting squatted in the future. I particularly have been putting most of my priority there. However, the new Tzeentch book was coming out, and I was worried that I was going to end up losing my chance to get to play some of my beloved Johnny-type Tzeentch list that I'd built before everything got changed. So it's worth pointing out that in this list here, we have the Curseling and we have Kyric Acolytes, both of which are performing at their old capacity before the FOMO box Arcane Cataclysm came out with the Lumineth Realm Lords units. So this is using the old rules because the new ones hadn't come out quite in time for the tournament, based off the cutoff date. The way Guild of Summoners works, though, is it sacrifices the normal Chaos God ability to be able to summon with whatever way you generate points throughout the game, summon demon units. It sacrifices your fully flexible list of demon units for being able to only summon Lords of Change, but the first Lord of Change comes in for 9 fate points instead of 30, and if you're not familiar, you earn these fate points by you or your opponent successfully casting spells that aren't unbound. And then the second one comes in for 18. It's 9 and then 2 times 9 because 9 is the sacred number of Tzeentch. And then the third one doesn't come at 27. It kind of should, but whatever. It comes in at 30. Now, I don't know if this list is ever going to, manage to survive the upcoming rules changes, so I really wanted to play it. I'm not a big fan of the no retreat rule from Host Duplicitous with a million pinks. That just feels kind of unfun to play against. Internal Conflagration got super nerfed in 3rd edition with the rules changes that came along with that. And Host Arcanum is kind of the de facto option now if you're not playing Host Duplicitous. It's the kind of flying friendly one, but it just wasn't as inspiring to me as this list was. So I wanted to get this one in. And then as far as grand strategy, Show of Dominance is easy with a big block of pinks. You just put them in the middle of the board and let them camp out there and hope they survive against bounty hunters, being that they are Galician veterans. And then, it's pretty easy to knock that one out. Otherwise, I've got flying units. I keep bringing in new Lords of Change, so it's possible to put things in all 4 quadrants if need be. Though, I guess that wouldn't be GVs. I think the rule, I could be wrong on this, but it has to be a GV in each one. If that's the case, then I basically have to have them in the middle. But honestly, that usually worked out, so it wasn't a problem. And then the Triumph Bloodthirsty, but at 1995, I generally wasn't getting that. So let me walk you through it real quick. The goal was to have as many casters as possible so that I would be getting up to that first Lord of Change every single first turn. Because I had 10 drops, though, in this list, I was pretty much always being forced to go first, which meant the normal Tzeentch range for spells is 18 inches, and in no single battle plan are you within 18 inches of your opponent without having a pregame move on one side or the other, or I guess a deep strike, so which wouldn't happen in your hero phase anyway. So you're basically just shooting stuff into the sky or buffing your guys with things like Arcane Bolt or things you can, Mystic Shield, or things you can use later like Arcane Bolt, but it still counts for getting your fate points up. So basically, the Curseling was a 2-caster, not anymore, and can immediately cast any enemy spells that are unbound and has rerolls and blah blah blah. 2-caster. Chaos Sorcerer Lord on Manticore is a coalition unit from Slaves to Darkness with the Mark of Tzeentch, and he has the best anti-horde spell in the game, which is really fun. You roll a die for every model in a given unit you choose. Each 5 is 1 mortal wound, and each 6 is D3. It actually, if you do the math, comes out to half the unit's worth of mortal wounds is allocated. So a unit of 60 zombies, they're taking 30 on average. Pretty awesome. And he's fast. He's a monster too, so that gave me a little bit of flexibility. And actually hits decently hard for a wizard monster unit. Gaunt Summoner on foot. Was a 2-caster as well, is a 2-caster as well, and then he can sacrifice once per game one of those casts to bring a unit of 5 pinks in, which don't get the full benefits of that a 10-man unit of pinks gets, but still gives you 25 wounds worth of bodies, which is pretty cool. A change caster, this is the kind of secret weapon of the list because I've given him an Arcane Tome in this list, made him a 2-caster as well, but he has an ability that for every 9-up, not unmodified 9-up, just a 9-up, and so that includes any pluses to cast, which you can get him up to +3 to cast pretty easily in this list. So 6s are triggering this. Every time you cast something successfully on a 9-up, he ends up getting another spell to cast, can cast another spell, which means I've seen him get 6 pretty easily, especially with the rerolls coming from cogs. Let's see. For battle line, I had 10 pink horrors with the split option, of course. 2 times 10 Kyric acolytes that were in, one of which was in Warlord Battalion, the other one was in Expert Conquerors. The pinks were also in Expert Conquerors, meaning when they're in blue/Brim stage, they're counting as 60 models on objectives, which is pretty hard to lift. That said, pinks do die way easier now than they used to, since they are Coalition veterans. For tankiness and anti-Galician veteran screens, I took 2 Chaos Chariots and 1 unit of 2, which gives them a champion. They do mortal wounds on the charge, and also are relatively tanky at 7 wounds apiece, 4-up save, and fast at 12-inch move. Can once per game run and charge. 10 Chaos Warriors, which each have 2 wounds with a 4-up save, 3-up if they're at 10 models, and a 5-up spell, a 5-up mortal wounds only ward save. They were also in Expert Conquerors, and they were pretty hard to lift, but still counted as GVs, so if someone had Bounty Hunters, I wouldn't put them in the front necessarily. And then 5 Chaos Knights, each with 3 wounds on a 4-up save, also with that 5-up mortal wound ignore. Oh, and we've got a typo in here with Meteoric Grandhammers. They most certainly did not have that. They had the Lances. That's from my last tournament report with Annihilators. But anyway, they were in Bounty Hunters and moved 10 inches, and were also a good screen being on big enough bases. I've also got listed down here that I summoned, on average, 2 Lords of Change, actually, and each one of those is worth 400 points, so that's 800 points worth of summoning, plus the unit of 5 pinks, so we're talking about 925 points worth of summoning, almost a 50% increase in my army size. First Lord of Change usually came in turn 1, and then the second would come in turn 3. Pretty reliably, and every single one of these 3 games I played, I got 2 out, and I almost got a 3rd one out in 2 out of 3 of the games, so not bad. In terms of total points, you see that's 1995. Total wounds is, this is definitely wrong. I did not update this from the last one, excuses there. The total wounds was actually closer to 200 if you count the pinks and the 5 summoned ones plus the Lords of Change. Forget everything else that's here. The models are wrong, the bodies are wrong. That's my bad, meant to go through that. But anyway, the total bodies was somewhere around 170, I believe, and the total models was over 100. But everything else here looks right. And as far as reinforced, 1 chariot unit was reinforced, so it's actually only 1 time. And then I also took, as far as endless spells go, cogs for the rerolls for all of my casters, which I do think is good, but has gotten a little nerfed for Tzeentch because the blue scribes can do the same thing for you, while it used to give you +1 spell to cast, which would have been insane in this list. I'm sad that that's gone, but it is what it is. And then Spell Portal. This was basically added to the list so that I could guarantee that on the turn 1 I was getting at least 1 of my spells to hit the unit, hit an enemy, assuming I go first. Put the spell portal up and put your most important spell through the portal, depending on what that one important spell would be. Alright, like I said, it takes a lot of time to get through talking about this list, but let's talk about the matchups. So, first game was supposed to be Tzeentch in a list, no offense to the guy. I had never met the guy, but he dropped out last minute. No offense to his list writing, but I do feel like I had a list that had a strong advantage against his. He took a Kairos list that didn't have a portal in it. He was in Host Arcanum, which meant he could do a pregame move with D3 flying units of 6 inches. He got an extra unit of 6 Screamers if he... that was the artifact or command trait, one or the other. I think it's the artifact. And if this is assuming that that character didn't die, which I might have targeted right away. Kairos, getting rid of Kairos would have been a primary objective here. or at least bracketing him so that he couldn't get an auto 6 mortal wounds off on his top bracket, which isn't that hard. I think you only have to put 3 wounds on him to knock him down. Furthermore, he had a Mutalith Vortex Beast in the list, which I was super excited to play against because I've wanted to play with one for a while and just haven't committed to buying the model. I'm going to wait till the Slaves to Darkness book comes out in the winter. But I think it's an amazing model, and hopefully the rules get better too. But that's just not like the kind of thing you pop in a list that's going to be particularly crazy. So I think ultimately I would have just ended up besting him, but he might have been an amazing player and known something about his list that I don't know. But in either case, I got switched last minute to playing the lovely Neil, who ran the tournament. Scottish dude, super lovely guy. The game, we basically played pretty casually. I ended up killing, I even actually rolled for this on my own just to see, because we called it after a couple turns. But I ended up killing all three of his Maw Crushers within 3 turns. And took out a certain amount of his Ard Boys, which meant I took out probably about 80% of his army within 3 turns. But because I had to protect myself from that initial Maw Crusher Alpha, had to castle up in a corner. This was in Prize of Gallet, where we had, I think, 5 objectives to worry about, and they come online at specific times based off of who takes the second turn. So he was choosing those, and I just couldn't get to the objectives in time until I'd killed his guys. If we played 5 turns, maybe I could have tightened the score up a little bit, but I deserved to lose this one, even though I did kill. I would have by 5 turns killed pretty much the whole army, but just could not have gotten the points. I'm pretty sure Neil scored this as a draw because of the last minute change, and because he was the TO, he didn't feel like it was fair to give himself a win. But in my record keeping, he definitely won, and it was just a matter of how the game works, how you play for objectives and not for killing stuff. That said, I do think it would be a nice update in 4th edition at some point if you got some amount of victory points for killing a certain percentage or hitting a threshold of your opponent's army. Because it was very one-sided. He actually didn't lift that much of my army, so he wouldn't have been able to match that at the same point. But anyway, I do think some people just like to see the world burn, and sometimes that should count for something. So maybe in 4th edition we'll see something like that. But it was a lovely game. I really enjoyed playing against Neil, and we were drinking from the get-go, so it was a true Anglo experience, America versus Scotland, and both of us living in the Netherlands. And he's a lovely guy. Second game, I got put up against my buddy Mitchell, who I've only beaten once in our 5 games I think we've played. So it was not this game. It was a very close game with his Night Haunt list. He had a Purple Sun that only ended up eating my Chaos Sorcerer Lord on Manticore, which, was something. That's 270 points. But with Tzeentch, I managed to knock that Purple Sun's threat level down pretty quickly. He had a full 6 heroes, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know new Night Haunt especially as well as I'd like to, but he had a good combo of all the stuff you want to see. He had Reichnor. He had who's the guy in the throne? I'm forgetting his name. Kurdos Valentian. He had the one Excruciator. He had a couple other things. It was a very tight game, and there were definitely a couple rolls that if they had gone my way, I would have gotten extra points for the GVs. This was Mighty and the Cunning, and that would have made a big difference. But it just didn't go that way, and he ended up winning with, I think, something like a 5 to 7 point lead, something like that. But it was a good game. We played kind of to the last minute there. So, it was could have gone either way. And like I said before, I like playing against friends, friendly games, and also closer games, and this was certainly all 3 of those things. I went into the game feeling a little more secure than maybe I should have, but again, it could have come down to dice rolls. And from what I understand of Tzeentch, it's always been one of these armies, except with very few exceptions, that has a hard time winning until the end of the game, and it's always pretty close, because even though they can be dominant in the Magic phase, generally speaking, things aren't won and lost in the Magic phase, with a few exceptions. My last game was against a Skaven player, Yachty, who I really enjoyed playing against. This was the overall, I'd say, closest game and most kind of just like interesting and fun game to play of the three. I did end up winning, but only by a few points. I think 3 victory points. It was certainly a close game. He had Thankful was running a bit of Eshin stuff. He had a lock on the Soul Screamer to move Thankful up, but I effectively ended up knocking out all of Thankful's effectiveness except for his Unbind prowess, which really did make a difference. I had some really bad magic phases in this game that I think would have made an even bigger difference for me if I had succeeded in them. But every time Thankful tried to get close enough to blow the crap out of my guys with his Warpfire Thrower arms, Bone Ripper's arms, which has an 8-inch range, I made a 6-inch redeploy 2 times, which never happens for me. I always throw super low for my redeploy, so he never got to shoot those guns off, I don't think, which was pretty crazy. Some other highlights of that game were, I mean, I got my birds up again. I ended up frying some things. We both missed a battle tactic at one point for whatever reason. It was just a really friendly game. It's the first time I've actually managed to beat Skaven. We had a great time, enjoyed each other's company, and I feel like there was one other thing that I really wanted to talk about in this list, but it's escaping me at the moment. But his army was super well painted. I thought it was awesome looking too, and yeah, it was a great one. This was Realmstone Cache, which definitely works in my favor. Because I have the pinks, and just throwing stuff right into the middle of the battlefield kind of guarantees that I'm going to be able to hold that objective pretty easily for the first 2 turns. He had a lot of bodies, and some of which were in Expert Conquerors. He had one block that ended up teleporting with, I believe, not the spell, but with the Gnawhole to one of the 2 exploded objectives, with a block of like 40 clan rats, which he easily held for however long, or till the end of the game, I guess, and I never managed to get my anti-horde spells off against him. So it was kind of like a weird push and pull type game, but was super fun. He had a Verminlord Deceiver in there too, which didn't end up actually doing a whole lot of work. I know he had Skitter, Slank, or whatever the new Eshin Underworld's Warband dude, also didn't end up doing as much as I think it should have. So basically, it was a lot of denying each other stuff, including a lot of my spells, but I ended up pulling it out in the end, which was a fun game. All right, so moving on to the concluding thoughts. The tournament results. I have no idea where I placed. Like I said, I went 1-2. Well, on the tournament record, I went 1-1-1 if I did get recorded as a draw, as I think I did for the first game. But as far as I'm concerned, I went 1-2. Definitely didn't win any prizes, though it was really fun painting my army within 5 days to prepare for this. My buddy Yopa lent me one of his Lords of Change that was fully painted, a Gaunt Summoner, and then his whole box of like pinks, blues, brims, so that I didn't have to cram those in. But I managed to paint everything else myself, and I'm pretty happy with the army theme. I've got everything on like snow-colored bases to accentuate the Tzeentch colors and the wide range of stuff. My mortals have a different look than my demons do. Anyway, I have no idea where I placed, but it was super lovely, and the painted armies looked fantastic. My buddy Lex had a purple sun that was like from Rick and Morty. I didn't know that, but it was. I couldn't help laughing at it. It was hilarious. He was one of the top 5 finalists. A new friend, Kai, not the Kai who played Bone Splitters, which I'll get back to in a second. He had an amazing army of corn guys that was all like 3D printed and on a million skulls. Looked fantastic. There was a great Skaven army with some custom-made Eshin elements that looked like ninjas and samurais. It was great. Chico, who won the painting competition, won with his everyone loves this army, this Lumineth army that's like Aladdin themed but uses grots, so very cool. And he had a new vulture conversion from the Cruel Boys as his tech list. Looked great. Also, his Umbral Spell Portal looks fantastic. It's basically like squig faces, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm forgetting what the last army was. It might have been a Slanesh army. I think it was, but I could be remembering this wrong. Anyway, as far as first place, I know first place was my buddy Kai, other Kai, who won with his Bone Splitters list with like something like 19, 20 drops or something like that. It's like as many the big stabbas as possible, and we're actually going to be playing, I think I'll be playing that list with him for a friendly game on Thursday. So looking forward to playing Bone Splitters for the first time, and really cool that he pulled out the win with that. I know one of the other players that won, if I'm not mistaken, was, I want to say a Beast Claw player, but maybe I have that backwards. It's been a minute since I've seen the results, and haven't seen the full updated results recently. So my apologies for forgetting that, but I'm sure all the wins were well deserved. And then future goals for this list, I'll be talking about my team's tournament variant of this list, but I basically used this tournament and like the 12 or so games leading up to it with this list to help me kind of refine what I think would actually add more. And my next list, unfortunately, does fall into the period where the FOMO box does hold. So I've taken the Curseling out of the list, and my Kyrex are no longer contributing the way I'd like them to. But I've added in a Soulscream Bridge for a little more flexibility, some Iron Golems, took instead of all the other Chaos elements that I had, kept the Manticore Lord in there. I bumped it up to 6 casters, or 6 heroes, so that I have more casts, but also so that I could take Command Entourage for an extra artifact, and another Command Entourage to give me access to 2 spells, which means even my Lords of Change will get 2 spells when they get summoned. I have so many spells to try to navigate now that I had to make an extended series of Magic the Gathering style cards for me to use during play, and I've even practiced the sequence of using the spells so that I can speed up my Magic phase, which is going way too fast in general. Closing thoughts, the tournament was fantastic, had a blast, and I'm looking forward to the next one there. Loved playing the Tzeentch list some more, even though all the battles were hard fought and only one was won. I had a great time as a Johnny player. Sometimes all you care about is getting to see your list do what it wants to do, and it got to do what it wanted to do in all 3 games, even if they were close or I lost. So great times, and looking forward to reporting back on the teams tournament coming up in 2 weeks' time. In the meantime, thank you again for watching. As always, please feel free to like, share, subscribe, join the Discord. We've recently hit 1,000 viewers, as you've probably seen with our table talk discussion. Thank you so much for that. Nick and I'll be back with a tournament report soon, and hopefully I'll be also putting out the D6 videos finally, after promising them for 2 months now, the Math Hammer videos. So thanks guys, we really appreciate everything, and looking forward to keeping in touch with you. All right, till next time, Ryan out.